Check. it's red, it's on. Testing.
Okay.
And then
Let's see here. Good evening and welcome to the Financial Review Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Madam Secretary, will you provide roll call, please?
When your name is called, please answer with here or present. Member Amesqua,
Here.
Member Frost,
Here.
Member Killebrew,
Here.
Vice Chair Federico,
Here.
Chair Mitchell.
Here.
For the record, all members of the Financial Review Committee are present.
We will now move on to public comments. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for the public comments portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Financial Review Committee and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the Financial Review Committee from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the agenda. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments at this time.
Okay. We will move forward to new business. The first item of new business is to nominate for a new chair. So do we have any nominations for a chair?
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate you to serve another year as the chair.
Second.
Okay. I don't even know what to say now. Any other nominations? I guess that's all. I'm okay doing it again.
I can take a vote unless you want to do the vice chair with it too.
Let's do the vice chair with that.
Okay.
I nominate Mike Frost.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take the vote. So the nomination for the chair will be Chair Mitchell, and the nomination for vice chair will be Member Frost. Member Amesqua.
Yes.
Member Frost.
Yes.
Member Killebrew.
Yes.
Vice Chair Federico.
Yes.
Chair Mitchell.
Yes.
This motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
On to the next item, the approval of the minutes from January 26th, 2021. Can I call for a motion?
I'll move that we accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no,
I'll take a vote.
you'll take a
for
vote.
this one. Member Amesqua.
Can I ask, should I vote since I wasn't here?
So you'll abstain.
Okay,
From there.
I'll abstain.
Okay. Member Killebrew.
Yes.
Member Federico.
Yes.
Vice Chair Frost.
Yes.
And Chair Mitchell.
Yes.
This motion passes by a vote of 4 with Member Amesqua abstaining.
Okay. Item number 3, quarterly financial report ending March 31st, 2021. The recommended action is for the Financial Review Committee to receive and discuss the information. Do we have a staff report?
Yes.
Excited
want-
staff report.
I think Robin wants to give it.
Bring this one.
Sure.
Oh, you know what? I can find it. It'll be.
She emailed it.
I'll find it.
Okay, staff report.
Let's see. This on? Yes, okay. So city finances are tracking mostly on budget. We ended up with 35.2 million, budgeted down 3 million compared to the last year. Pretty much as expected, TOT and sales tax were the lowest or the highest decreases in revenues. Expenditures are 3.2 million lower than the same period last year, with most notable decreases in city attorney and transfers to capital improvements. Let's see. I mean, everything is, what else do I cover here? Everything was pretty much in line with the budget. We ended up with amended budget of 38.7 million. And our reserves at the end of the fiscal year will be are budgeted at 14.3 million. Are there any questions about anything in here?
I have a question on page 1 of the quarterly financial report. Under the general fund expenditures for March 2021 were 3.2 million lower than the same period last fiscal year.
Mhm.
What's the biggest change there?
Biggest was the transfers from general fund to CIP, 1.5 million.
Okay.
And then we had a few other variances, some decreases in city attorney and storm drain. Street maintenance was, storm drains was because of larger expenditures in the prior year.
I'll probably have this question a lot this evening, but why are the city attorney fees so much lower?
It was mainly for
I'll handle it.
like the
So
code enforcement related matters.
yeah, so city periodically has issues where the city attorney's costs will go up in litigating or addressing emerging issues. So code enforcement wise, we've had a couple regarding sober living homes. There's a property in receivership, the Seaside Inn. So that runs up costs that aren't recurring. So those occurred last year and not to the same extent this year.
Okay, gotcha.
Investment, in CIP, so that's why we did big transfers in prior year.
Okay. And then also on page 3 of that same report, the intergovernmental cost reimbursements. Let's see, my question was, in a non-COVID environment, do we normally have this?
It's it's normally pretty small because it's like state reimbursements, mandated cost reimbursements and things that we collect. This was so high because we had the funding, which got transferred in there.
Gotcha. Does anybody on the committee have any questions?
Is the audience for this report also, or does it go beyond that?
Posted on the website as well for citizens.
Yeah, I mean, one thing as I was reading all of this materials, I thought it would be helpful if you look at the reserves with the amounts. If you added a column that had like the targeted amount, kind of give you a quick visual as to where we are relative to it.
Sure.
And then when I looked at cash and investments, I just thought, is there more information that should be provided? And I don't know if people want more, but
We do in our treasurer's report,
okay.
which we don't put that on the website, but we can provide it to you. And it goes to council every.
I just thought, like, would it be useful to have like the weighted average life of each of these investments? Would it be useful to compare to where it was the prior quarter, the prior year, just something to measure it against?
That is all every month.
Okay.
And we can make the FRCs on the distribution list for that, so.
Okay.
On the general fund expenditures by function on the group summary at the bottom of the page, it's 31 or page 104. How come on this specific line item for expenses that cafeteria plans aren't listed, but in the general fund budget they are?
Function is that like general government, community development, public works, public safety, that? Okay. So the cafeteria allowance is part of, I think, retirement benefits line item, but that's, what's that? It would be under, I think it would be under general government.
Okay, I just wasn't sure why it's listed separately in one place and not in another place.
Oh, on the other report? Probably
Uh-huh.
because that report is specifically grouping it by those functions that are part of our CAFR. And then the other report is going to show them by, I think it lists them by personnel and materials and supplies. So what you're talking about would be under personnel
Okay,
for each department.
okay, because it specifically lists like retirement plan, cafeteria plan, salaries, so that's why I
Yes.
was confused.
Because that's part of the, like, for each department.
Mhm.
And then each function is made up of multiple departments.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion from the committee?
I have one real quick.
Yeah.
Trending, Mike, and it's kind of normally where we talk about what the hoteliers talk about trends and what they're seeing for TOT. Robin, do you have any sense of how TOT is trending and what we should look forward to for the next couple quarters?
It seems to be improving, and I think there's more to talk about that in the long-term financial, the proposed budget.
Improving. So we are getting indications from hoteliers that group business is starting to come back, and that's where we're mostly suffering that's where we'll be suffering in the near term more so than the vacationers, if you will. But we're doing better than the amended budget. We were tracking right on the amended budget until literally spring break, and we saw some improvement, and still hopeful that one of our properties that is managing their the demand for their rooms by increasing the rates upwards of 150 to 170%. And it's keeping their occupancy down in the 5 to 15% range. Recently noticed that they dropped those high rates by about 20%, and their occupancy is now starting to creep up. So that had been a major drag. All the other properties, I've got several small ones that last for March set records for the month of March. And the bigger ones, I'm projecting, upwards of 40% occupancy by the end of the year, but that's on room rates, rack rates that are running 120% of normal. So they're all managing their demand by increasing the rates, but it's coming back. And there, like she said, there is a good discussion both in the long-term financial plan, and I'll talk about some of it in the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, this was just a receive and discuss. So we will move on to the next item unless there's more discussion. Nope. Okay. Item number 4, the proposed year-end 2021-22 and 2022-23 budget and long-term financial plan. Again, the recommended action here is for the committee to receive and discuss the information. Can we have staff reports?
This really quick. Everybody should have received a budget book. Thank you to staff for putting all that together. And just as far as process, if you will, it's before the Financial Review Committee today. Any recommendations that this group might want to forward onto the council, this will be on the May 4th agenda. And depending on how that goes and whether or not the council wants to have another workshop, there could be one on May 18th. We'll be asking the council at a publicly noticed hearing June 1st, assuming we're far enough along and think that they were ready to take a vote on the budget, would be June 1st. And we've also got June 15th as a backup if they want to keep talking about the budget. And we do have to adopt it before July 1st. So with that process in mind, this budget ended up being probably one of the easier budgets I've ever had to deal with because we're hunkered down, if you will, trying and riding out the storm that was COVID and the impact on our revenues. Our financial policies have served us extremely well. They were tested within a year after adopting them. And in my opinion, they have served us really well. We, not unlike council direction a year ago when the pandemic first hit and the stay-at-home order came out from the governor and the hotels were either closing or just losing all business. The focus has been on all the way down at all levels of staff to work to still deliver all the services and find ways to save money. And staff's done an incredible job helping us all through this. The policies, and I point this out as a separate bullet purposefully, the first time in my work career had financial policies that valued continued investments into maintaining infrastructure and facilities. Normally, those are the first things in a government. When times get tough, they'll immediately they'll cut back the money for all the road improvement projects. And it's something you don't see the impacts on for, years, if not decades, but they are real and they happen. But like the current administration that's making those, in my words, short-sighted decisions, doesn't have to suffer the consequences of that action. It's just we're able to keep all the services going, but you don't see the fact that they're falling behind on maintaining assets. So that from the outset of putting this budget together, the direction to Public Works and General Services in regards to our horizontal infrastructure, if you will, that Public Works maintains, and our facilities, that General Service was, tell me what you need to maintain our assets, and we'll work the rest of the budget around it to the extent possible. We were able to do that. Obviously, the council also said we need to replenish our reserves, sooner rather than later. So that's planned for in this. It was also the intent of those financial policies to provide for actual use of those reserves. Using reserves historically has been a third rail politically. Our financial policies say this is what these reserves are for. I do have a direction from council to work on replenishing the reserves. And then obviously always planning for the future. And we started a lot of that with the current 2-year budget we're in. There's a financial policy that also says that we have to balance out over a long-term plan. We went out 6 years with this long-term financial plan update. It's required 5. Went ahead and went out another year. So those are kind of the tenets, if you will: maintain what we have, find smarter ways to do things, and plan for the future. Moving on to the next slide, the actual impact from COVID in last fiscal year, FY20, when the pandemic started impacting our revenues, and then through this year, when I go back and I look at our long-term financial plan projections, and the first 2 years of those was the 2-year budget we're in now, just looking at the 4 revenue streams that are on this sheet, just in that 2-year period, it's 10.6 million. Also looking forward into the next 2 years and using my projections from 2 years ago, it's about another 1.2 million lingering impacts on TOT and sales tax in particular. Because I didn't put us right back to the same levels of revenues because we don't expect to get them. But the fact that this year's trending consistent with the modeling we put together is, I think, bodes well, assuming nothing else happens over the next 2 years. But I'll go a little bit into climbing out of it in a couple slides. Real quick on high level view of the general fund. For this year, the deficit spending is at 3.6 million. Next year at 1.5, and then you'll see, things are rocking and roll again in FY23. These numbers do not include the 6.32 million that we're estimated to get from the American Rescue Plan. I didn't want to put them in there. We still don't have guidelines or guidance from the Department of Treasury that interprets Congress's act and figures out how to actually make it all happen. We are expecting to get the first half of whatever our allotment is. Hopefully it's half of 6.32 million sometime before mid-June. So when that happens, the plan per council direction to date has been replenish the reserves, put money back into the other accounts we borrowed from. So we did borrow out of the designated funds set aside for unfunded pension liability, and also out of the, we didn't transfer $1 million to the CIP fund for the community investment account. So working those back in as well. So the 6.3 million will dig us out. It doesn't replace the $12 million we actually lost, but managing our way through this and doing it in this manner. We even did it last year when we adjusted the current year budget. We didn't include money that we didn't get yet. So the CARES Act funds, when we put the amended budget together, we didn't have those plugged in until it was more certain. So it's kind of the same approach here.
Can I ask a question now?
Shoot.
So to replenish all the reserves of the borrowed money, what is that number?
That was, I've actually got I believe it was in the 4.5 million range, if I'm not mistaken. I know I have a sheet in here. Yeah. So it was, I think we're up to, with this coming year, up to about 3 million out of the economic stability reserve, and then the $1 million from each of the pension, the unfunded pension liability, and the community investment account. It was probably at the 5 million. Recognize also that we ended up, compared to our amended budget, had a quote surplus last year that also helped FY21. This year, I don't have in here what our estimate to close is, but we're trending probably off the top of my head about $1 million to $1.3 million to the good. That will show up when we that all goes into the same equation with replenishing reserves, putting the money back in the designated accounts, and the financial policies actually address if we have excess from what our reserves policy are, that it be considered first. Well, things to be considered for use of those one-time monies, like a surplus, would be paying down debt. So unfunded liability qualifies in that, and also making one-time investments. So there'll be community investment account. So, all right. Looking at slide 5, these are the ending reserve balances budgeted. So you'll see the different line items. The economic stability reserve policy is 11%. And I got your comment on the quarterly financial to actually show what it is to policy. I believe if I'm not mistaken, I am mistaken. My sheet that doesn't have a couple lines printed on the sheet that's in the budget book actually shows where we're at. Looking at the economic stability reserve, it's when it gets down in this proposed budget to 1.1 million, 1,083,000, that's about 26% of policy. And then, yeah. And then the thought is we're going to hopefully get 3.16 million in American Rescue Plan monies here that would bring that up probably to 80%. And then when we get the second slug of that next year, would obviously refill that, also add back to the Section 115 pension trust that's shown on here. So you'll see the 5 million going back in the second year of this budget. And then we'd have excess fund balance that would also transfer back over to the CIP fund into the community investment account. So. All right, a little bit more of the details. I talked about TOT, but just looking at what we're getting in this year compared to our actuals from 2 years ago. So it wasn't even what I was actually projecting more than what we actually got 2 years ago for this year we're in. 48% hit. So almost half of our TOTs from where we were at 2 years ago. For next year, quite a bit climbing back compared to those 19 numbers. And we already saw it this year when things opened up a little bit more in the this past summer. And with the hoped for lifting of the stay-at-home order on June 15th, the hotels are doing well on advanced bookings now. So we're still down from the 19 numbers in my budget projections for next year by 14%. And then by FY23, so 4 years of growth, if you will, is about 12, it ends up being about 12% compared to those 19 numbers. I used 19 on here because that was our last normal year. I do not have any new hotels, revenue from any new hotels baked into this. They're pushed out into the FY25, 6, and 7 timeframe for the Wave Hotel, the new one out on the Point, and the last one would be the new one in the harbor. So we're all the way out at the end of our 6-year projections, starting to plug those numbers in, and even that, they're baked in pretty conservatively. Property tax has been extremely positive for us and continues to be, not only because we're solidly getting the 2% growth that's allowed each year in properties that don't change hands, but our building activity is still really high. So all those properties are getting assessed both on sale and then the improvements. Ton of work going on in Monarch Beach area. We got a big slug, and I didn't show it on a slide. I probably should have. We'll have a record amount of property transfer tax this year. I think we still have 1 or 2 small payments coming, but we're up in the 800, 850 range. Normally, I think 450,000 is a normal amount we would get on property transfer tax, but we're more than double that without a hotel sale. So when we have a hotel sale and, you know, a St. Regis sells, you know, for $400 million, we get a good chunk of money. I think we got 250 or 300,000 from the last sale of one of those. Without one of those, we're still going to set a record this year. So property tax has been a star performer. It is our second largest revenue. Sales tax, same as with TOT, is down. Not to the same extent, but it is still down quite a bit. FY23, you'll see I've got a 4.4% growth. But when you look at my out years, I drop it back down to about 2.5. And then charges for services and license and permits, those are our planning, building, and engineering. As I've been doing incorrectly for 6 years or 5 years, assuming that the development activity is going to drop. So I project lower revenues, and like this year, I think we're probably going to be at almost 200% of what was in the budget. So we're still setting records, but at some date, that work's going to drop off. And I just hate to, I'm looking at it more as one-time revenue, and, you know, we can live with our means. A lot easier when things tail off if we don't assume we're going to get a bunch of money from them. We still get the money, and it still ends up in our fund balance at the end of the year, and the financial policies help us to direct those surpluses. But I mean, I just had a public works director in my office yesterday talking about how to manage getting through all these swimming pool permits and all the engineering work they got to do on those. He says it's absolutely crazy. And I said, yeah, it's just people in the last year decided they wanted to get swimming pools done. There weren't enough contractors around, but there's still that demand there. And money's still cheap to borrow, so people are getting the seconds on their houses, and they're building a swimming pool. But we're still seeing record. I bought pizza for the planning and building staff the other day because they were slammed at about 12:15 when I was walking out of my office, and there was lines like over to the stairway. The lobby was as full as they're allowed to get. So it's a good thing.
Mike, one thing, whenever I think of charges for the services, I always think that we have enough contractors to basically always have it net out. So, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair way to think about it.
Um,
Whether we're higher or lower, we're going to net out.
At the end of the day, over any 5-year period, I can't make a profit. How's that? So that's the way our fees are set.
Got it. But if it does come in much lower, we just don't have,
We won't see the contracts, but you'll also see, I don't give them the contracts. We come back to council asking for budget authority because we're busy. I don't just put the budget in. I don't just give them a full budget based on this high level of activity.
got it.
It's a lot easier to manage others spending money when they don't have the budget to spend. They got to come and ask for it and work for it.
Got it.
As I mentioned back on one of the first slides, investments in capital assets is important. So we've got $10 million over the next 2 years in our capital projects. Proposed budgets includes full funding for public works plans to keep our roads at 75 to 85% or 75 to 85 grades out of 100. We do have two unique items in that budget. The council asked us to put money aside for Doheny Village connectivity design, and our guys think they can actually get some of the smaller improvements done out of this. So I called it design and improvements. So they're rocking and rolling on getting all the designs done for identified in the connectivity study. And then storm drain improvements. Storm drain system has been a deferred maintenance that we're bringing forward in work. I've got I think about $5 million budgeted in 23 and 24 to do some major storm drain line projects. There is in this budget, and Member Frost we had a discussion about this. He asked me some questions about the CIP. We do have $1.1 million. It's about $500,000 a year in various categories of projects that aren't identified projects. But if we get a call, somebody needs an ADA ramp in their neighborhood that doesn't have one, the Public Works Department has a budget to draw from to do, unidentified issues with the storm drains. They can go and fix it. Sidewalks, curbs, gutters. So they do have money to go patch something that happens, fix things. So he does. It isn't just the major projects that he has budget for capital. And on the facilities fund, we've got 1.6 million proposed. That includes finishing. We've been doing HVAC work on City Hall and some upgrades. Now we're actually looking at some more upgrades, if you will, for the types of filtering that the system can do, given what we've learned from COVID. But actually finishing the HVAC systems update. Our elevator is in need of major renovation, so there's money in the budget for that. We do have proposed to build out a senior center gym that doesn't exist today. If you've ever been in the community center, in the gym itself, there's a stage that's hardly ever used, and then there's a storage room that our rec staff's used over the years. And this proposal is to take the stage out, take the wall out between them, put a wall in, maybe some windows, and exercise equipment for seniors. It was identified by the seniors in a survey we had done with them 2.5 years ago as something they'd really like. Our staff went around to a couple other senior centers, and they love them. They're used all day long. So I think it's a cool amenity. Also looking to, for some of our larger meetings, we're challenged with audiovisual capabilities at the community center. So looking to use some restricted money that we get from Cox through Cox cable bills that's available to do this kind of stuff. It's like renovating this council chamber. We use that money. So we're looking to add capabilities there, but also to have a mobile system, if you will, that we could also take when we're doing festival whales or concerts or what have you. Renovating the playground, batting cages, the netting and restroom at the back of the community center, the ball fields, Creekside Park, the shade structures and canopies in the need to be replaced, and the rubberized needs to have the rubberized playground redone or done in some place. I think there's sand on part of it. The Sycamore Creek workout trail that goes from Stonehill toward the community center is in dire need of updating. We've been talking for a couple of years about a community garden. There are a lot of people on a long waiting list to get into our community garden up here on the corner. So there's an opportunity to utilize the back part of our Creekside Park closest to San Juan to put a pretty sizable community garden back there. Give a lot of people an opportunity to have a garden space. And then right now, for the last couple of years, since our reorganization, our park staff has been, their office cubicles are in our emergency operations center. So we want to move them downstairs over below community development. So just building out that space for them, and then we can get right now, if we have to activate our emergency operations center, we're moving a bunch of stuff out of the way to get all the people in that work on the emergency response team.
Did we skip slide 7?
Oh, did I do that? You're right, I did. Fat fingers. Our sheriff's contract, subsequent to producing the proposed budget late last week, I got the final numbers from the county for the sheriff's contract, and they are $375,000 lower than I put in the proposed budget. So this will be one of the adjustments we'll make before the council adopts the budget. So our bottom line, essentially the economic stability reserve will be up by that amount, but we've got some other small adjustments that we'll bring forward as well. So it's only 2.5% increase. I think there's been quite a bit of pressure on the sheriff's department, not only to operate more efficiently, not just from all the cities, but from the county itself. They're hit financially because of COVID, was on par with ours. So I usually budget about a 4% increase every year. In fact, I budget a 4% increase every year, and that compounds. So only having 2.5%, it helps.
Yeah.
I'll leave the FY23 budget alone in case there's a spike in the second year, but it will equate to about a budget increase of 5.5% roughly over what our final contract is for this coming year.
So I'm curious, is the rate that we pay per police officer the same for all contract cities, or does it differ by
Yes.
city?
No.
The same. And then secondly, when they give you their number, do they tell you what percentage of the contract is for retirement?
Yes.
So you do know that?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And that's where the growth
Depends
is
on the
coming from?
position.
Mhm.
Well, their load, if you will, for retirement and other benefits is for a deputy sheriff 2, which is the position you see most of our badges are. Take their salary and multiply it by about 110%. That's that's how much it costs us. The pension portion of that, I think, is about 75%. That includes an unfunded liability kicker, if you will. So it's sizable. On personnel costs and unfunded liability, we had 64 approved positions in our base budgets this year and last. There's 65 in the proposed. That includes the social worker that the grant-funded social worker that the council added, and we got on staff starting in January. That is our homeless outreach liaison. So otherwise, it's the same level of staffing. There aren't any. We did major reorganizations in the budget we're in now, and the prior budget. Eliminating a department and shifting the divisions over to the Parks and Rec department. Took Parks and basically got rid of the department head and put the divisions under other departments. And we also flattened other parts of the organization. So the heavy lifting on reorganizing occurred in this last 2-year budget. We do have budgeted a finance manager position They're like an administrative services. It's kind of I'll say it's more like a division manager if they were to department manager, department head. So, but they'll likely report to the assistant city manager, as will a direct report will be the human resources manager. They've traditionally been under a finance. So still have the body. It's a manager level as opposed to a director. But that's in the budget, and the minute the council recruiting. The merit pay pool, per our MOU with our labor unit, we have to budget 3% raises. But the city has the ability within that during hardship years like this year was to not actually give raises. And we did that this year. So it's back in the budget in the coming 2 years. I did want to point out a little bit of detail to understand our pension costs. Not sure if it's helpful, but just knowing that the city does not participate, everybody does, but so we don't have that contribution, the 6.2%. Neither do the employees. For normal pension costs, the city pays 10.9% of pay. The employees pay 7%. And then we've got an unfunded liability component of our pension payments that the city pays it's equivalent to 5.4% for FY22's budget, and employees will be paying 2%. So a total of 7.4 is the full hit for the unfunded pension portion. The employees also, we phased in that 2% starting in FY20. They picked up 0.5% starting in FY20. The year we're in now, this last July 1st, they picked up another 0.75%. So they're at 1.25% for the unfunded. And then starting July 1 here in a couple months, it goes up to 2%. So that was phased in. And as the way the current labor agreement reads is as long as the city has an unfunded liability, the employees will be picking up the 2%. And then for everybody except department directors and the city manager, there is a $50 a month increase in cafeteria benefit allowance. The way this current labor agreement reads is until the lowest level employee, through a formula based on changes in our premiums, is making the same amount as the next in line would be the department directors, not much. So the city manager's position in this 6-year plan still has not reached a increase. So it's held the same until everybody else catches up. So, all right, I covered slide 8. Slide 9, really quickly, we still have $800,000 set aside in the general fund for the ongoing multi-year general plan update. We're tackling the housing element and safety elements as we speak, and other elements, they're not in any particular order, are just listed here. This will take several years. There will probably come a time in the next year where we'll be hiring a consultant to assist us through looking at going through our general plan and holding the outreach meetings. Doheny Village Plan, which the environmental impact report got posted yesterday. That's good news. Expect that to be done at the city level this next year, and then has to go to the Coastal Commission. And I mentioned already the $400,000 set aside for the connectivity plan design. I talked about the citywide storm drain master plan, getting that updated. And then council's already directed an update of the strategic plan. So I believe 2 members of this committee are sitting on a special committee to work with city staff to update that. That concludes my presentation. I think it's a good budget.
Is there any discussion from the committee?
Yeah, Madam Chair. So I busted Mike's eardrums all morning today. I actually had a lot of fun. I think it's a good budget too. I just have some little items, and really they're probably questions for the other members of this committee to see if I'm crazy or if these are things you guys would like to. Within our budget, sort of the highest level, I guess I would consider it an income statement, and our fund changes. This would be page, what would this be, 6 and 7 of the big book, sort of like the 1 and 2 pagers that you would carry with you to a community meeting, or at least I would. So I would love the CIP fund balance broken out on this. And it kind of, it obviously doesn't have to be quite as detailed as what you have under the general fund. But when I'm talking to folks, I like to express our total unrestricted funds, including the CIP stuff. Because we have a lot in CIP. And we certainly could move it back if we wanted to. I'm not suggesting we ever would. But the one metric I think of the most is total unrestricted funds relative to our revenue. And what does the California treasurer say? 16.7% or 2 months. And so when I add ours together, it's way over that. And so I like to communicate that to, Lantern Village or whomever I'm talking to. So that'd be my main proposal. Let's see here. Well, here, I'll let you guys see. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. To me, adding, or at least being able to reference those on our main summary sheet, I would like to be able to do that. Our CIP is Fund 11, and it's so much, like, those are our 2 biggest ones. And I just think the ability to break that out and say, hey, community investment. I'm sorry, page 6 and 7. Oh, of the total book, excuse me.
Yeah, you're in the yellow. The yellow tab.
You could have told me that before, Mr. Mayor. I didn't need to go through that diatribe.
Are you asking staff to combine it onto here? Could you not just show somebody the overall general fund and then show them the CIP? It seems like it's a lot on one page, right?
No, we could.
He just wants to be able to take something to like a meeting and show somebody and say, hey, here we go.
I'll cut and paste them onto one sheet and photocopy them for you.
Okay, well then that's fine. That's fine. Okay, well if you're gonna make fun of me for that one, okay.
I am making fun. Is that what you're asking to do? Is to depict the 2 together on a sheet of paper on a summary somewhere?
So when we were coming up with our plans on how do we live through the COVID pandemic hit, I had a slide that showed the balances in each of all of these accounts that are council designated. They're not restricted. So I could produce that pretty easily. I will make that page for you.
Yeah, I would just say that's a formal process.
We're not making fun of.
Well, no, that's actually, so there's a method behind my madness. That's why I'm asking you. I know that there's some better sort of representations of our overall assets or fiscal positions in these different funds. And if that's what you're looking for to show residents, I think that's important for proposing and voting on and approving a budget. I don't think it's important because that's really for the council to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
To achieve though what you want a handout for somebody or a nice sort of slide to show something or a talking point. I think Mike's got better options for you for that, and he might.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
The-
That'd be fine.
I've seen him before. It's not in here,
Yeah,
but
it's
he's in previous.
It's not all in one place. It's all in here. So
I was
you're-
asking for a report that of everything I like. Yes, that
Yeah,
was.
I
me.
actually added, and Raul, your question earlier about the reserve percentages, they're actually on those 3 pages, 6, 7, and 8 at the bottom. You'll see that I break out the reserves and I have the percentages next to them. So you'll see economic stability reserve, the target's 11%. In the current year, FY21, it stands at 5.68, not 11. And if you go all the way to the right, it'll show you that it's 51.64% of target. And then you go to the next year, you'll see it drop down to 25% of target. And if I didn't have this detail on this page, I would probably expand the fund balance section across the board, but there's so much on the general fund now. I tried to put it all on this page. That's actually why I put the summary page right before these. You'll see the 1-pager that shows ending fund balances just for the general fund. I could pretty easily probably add just to this one to add other unrestricted balances.
Yeah, I think that's an important concept because isn't that, well, I mean, I know we have our financial policies and we have our percentages, but isn't that 16.7 like the holy grail ratio?
It's actually not.
Oh.
It's a recommended, but you have to look at everything else that is involved with your business to assess potential risks from economic downturns. You know,
Yep.
what kind of insurance coverage do you have? There's a lot more that goes into actually coming up with the percent. But they kind of generally recommend 2 months of
Yep.
either revenues or expenditures. They don't even choose from that, but that is Standard & Poor's recommendation, if you will. That GFOA actually looks to as, you know, kind of the start of trying to figure out what your holy grail looks like.
Yep. Okay, well, I mean, look, it's not a game changer. I just think total unrestricted, quick ability to quickly reference that is valuable.
Any other discussion from the committee?
Madam Chair, I have questions.
Of course.
By the way, I was giving Member Frost a hard time, but I don't disagree with, like you do in a lot of the PowerPoint presentations, pulling the stuff out and having the dumbed down sort of primer that people can look at. I personally don't think it's important to be in the binder because the binder is for the council to vote on this. That's not for the handout, but having that stuff all in one place. And I do think all of the reserve funds, the overall general fund, the capital improvement funds, and then there might be other monies that you want to look at, whatever, you know. I've seen some really good ones Mike's done before in like our long-term financial plan presentations and stuff like that. And not even in this manner that they're in here, where they're very accountant balance sheet looking. But when you put them into a spreadsheet on a slide, it's easier that's why if you're asking for this to give to residents, I think you actually want it on the slide, not in the, because usually they glaze over on the slides. But anyway, that is a long segue into, I think that the presentation to the council is good. I do have a couple questions about budgeting and long-term planning. Our franchise fees, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent on franchise fees, but where are those? And is there ever a point where we think we should, do we have any other options for franchising, and is Cox our only option in town for
for cable, for example, you mentioned Cox earlier.
Not for a franchise, because you go satellite, then they're not using public property and therefore don't have to be the only provider. So there's no franchise to exact payment from. So DirecTV, whatever the other ones are. I have DirecTV, so I don't know of any other. And when you look at telecommunications and federal law, you know, they're making it easier and cheaper for that industry to put up small cell wireless, and you know, basically cutting our local discretion out of the picture.
Right.
We literally have like shot clocks now. You have to process it through planning in 60 days. So I don't, what other franchises?
Well, I guess data and internet are the one that people complain most about. You know, how much do we get in franchise fees? Where are they? I don't even know where to find them.
They're under taxes. Look on page 12 at the top. Third one down.
If you can't find it, Mr. Mayor, I will photocopy it.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, what are cable franchise peg fees? That's 11, sorry, 12, you said?
Wait, what was your question?
11 or 12, page 11 or 12. I see franchise tax
Franchise fees.
fees.
Yes. That's cable, telephone. So in that,
Okay.
we've got AT&T, we've got Cox, we have SDG&E. That's AT&T. And SoCal Gas.
What about for trash?
That is down below in the other revenue. So if you're on page 13, section called other revenue. Am I in the right spot?
Other
Yeah, solid
engineering.
waste. Oh, is there franchise? I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on my franchise fees.
There's also Fund 12 peg fees.
Well, that's
in there.
peg fees, yeah.
What is a PEG fee? I'm sorry, clarify that,
Public
please.
educational, it's money we can use to share the glory that is doing business on cable. So our council meetings,
Oh, okay,
Mm.
gotcha.
planning commission
All right,
meetings.
thank you.
Okay, so the franchise fees are not insignificant.
No,
And if we ever, are there ways for us to look for other providers? Are there other options? Is it ever something that is budgetary, just from a budget perspective, is there any value in doing it?
I don't believe so, but let me ask the question. Like even with cable franchises, state usurped a lot of the local authority, and it's now it's actually a state franchise that we're still benefiting from to the same extent we were before it was us. So that the higher levels of government have made decisions to, not unlike the phone industry, they've convinced the legislators to take the power of regulation up to higher levels.
Gotcha. Not on a budget perspective, but from a resident perspective, I think internet is the biggest thing I hear complaints about, and just quality of internet and options.
Yeah, you're gonna see with small cell, you're gonna see people. You already see it. People are jumping over to hotspots and using cell service for internet connectivity. So that's just going to accelerate
Will
as
that
they get more.
impact our franchise fees
Yeah.
in the long run? As that
Yes.
starts to happen, those will reduce,
Yes,
probably tied to the number of.
the telephone is one of four, if you will,
Mhm.
or the Cox, I should say. The Cox is one of four, so it's not the whole 1.3 million. But yes,
Right.
that will
Okay.
be, and we don't get franchise fees from, like I said, Cox cable. If they don't, We will get, I believe there's some franchise fee we get, but it's not huge.
Okay. That's actually very helpful. So as that industry evolves, that number may dwindle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And remember, if we're getting a franchise fee, they're adding it as a tax, if you will, or an assessment on everybody's bills.
Sure.
Um,
Gotcha.
Is that why that number in the budget is decreasing?
Yep.
Gotcha.
All right.
And it's been trending like that for probably 4 years.
Our employment contract, how much more? I know we renegotiated that a couple years ago. How much time is left on that contract?
The end of this year, so we'll actually be talking with the city council. Do you know when I think is the second meeting in May. So we'll start talking about labor negotiations. We have our first meeting, working toward that later this month. I think the date was just set. So we'll start talking about it. Typically we would get closer to actual resolution on that labor agreement that would take effect starting January 1, sometime in the fall.
Cool. And then specific to my position on the CASA board, money, as you well know, CASA does not. It's when you look at it is one of our departments. It's one of the services that we provide through contract services, not unlike police and fire, but it is one of our main responsibilities. And that agency does not have the financial policies or budget process that the city here does, unfortunately. Are we programming for them all the things that we talked about that you know that they need funding wise?
I've programmed their proposed budget for next year. Any of the things they're talking about in regards to pension, for instance, those would be one-time events that I don't have a number for and didn't plug in, but that's certainly something we need to keep in mind and have a game plan for if and when that does happen. Right now, what's baked in are their base pension payments that include normal cost and a contribution toward their unfunded liability.
The standard one, right?
Yep.
So no paying down of the unfunded liability or.
No, but we are on the hook for that, for
Right.
our portion of that.
We know that
unfunded
we are on the hook for it. And it's a number that's not so big that I don't think you could handle it in one time, that you couldn't handle it in a one-time payment, right?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we're sort of for the record that we're tracking that. And that's all I have. Thanks, Madam Chairman.
I was wondering, so I could put my 2 cents in about getting the report that I'd like to see. On the fiscal year end, where you show the actual for 1920, amended for 21 and proposed for 22 and 23. For 19, 20, and 21, is there like an actual versus budgeted, like side-by-side thing that we can see?
Yeah, so we go to council with our year-end report, our rollover report, if you will, that has the whole discussion. So every September, so we can get you the last 2 Septembers that explains budget versus final actual. The CAFR also has budget versus actual, our audited financial statements.
Okay. Yeah, if you could email those, that would be great.
I actually have them in this model. I didn't print them. I hide columns just to be able to get information on one page. And it'd be a lot of work to, we can print them right out of the reports, right out of the accounting system.
Okay, that'd be cool. I think it would just be nice to see at least the last 2 years anyways, definitely. And then on page 37 of the Department for City Manager, what is the Hoffman statute? I noticed that line item.
It's our Joyce Hoffman. It's our latest statue that council commissioned for Waterman's Plaza across from Doheny.
Okay.
Joyce Hoffman is a famous surfer, Dana Point's past, and we should have that statue completed sometime in the next several months.
So why is that that money coming out of the city manager's
Oh,
budget or
be-
economic development versus the
Good.
arts and public places budget?
Arts and Public Places doesn't have a budget. There's an account.
Account, excuse me.
When they spend that money, a department is in charge of managing the project. It just happens that our assistant city manager / economic development manager, Kelly Renders, is in charge of that contract. So when we took the money out of the Art and Public Places reserve account, we gave the budget here.
Gotcha.
So
But
in
that's
the
where the
general-
money came from, was art and public
Yes.
places. Okay, that helps. Thanks. That helps. Let's see. What should I do here? And on page 61 in the Community Development Department, it looks like there was positions added.
No. Oh.
In the increase in the salaries
Oh.
in account number 1010, looks like it was pretty significant. So what's going on there?
Let me turn to, it's not positions.
Or salaries?
There would have been vacancies and contracts. This assumes full staffing. But let me double check to make sure I'm not,
Yeah.
if you look at page 18 of the budget book, it's got the breakdown of positions by department. And we can look at community development, and it is the same number of positions. You will see that one. Yeah, it's the same number of positions. There may be adjustments between the type of position, but it'll be vacancy savings.
Because it just looked like in every other department, there was a slight increase or decrease in.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of turnover, if you will, in our planning staff a couple years ago.
Okay.
And then our building official was vacant for a while. Like this year, we were running, one of our code enforcement officers got promoted to be a building inspector, so we've got a vacancy there. We budget as if the position's going to be here. Sometimes we have to take money that isn't being spent because we don't have a body and contract for those services, or sometimes it's simply savings.
Okay, yeah. This was just the only department I noticed a significant increase in the personnel cost. So, let's see. That one, answer that question. And then on page 91 of the budget for the city attorney, this might have been answered already. There was, for fiscal year 21 in the amended budget, there was an additional $360,000 added for attorney litigation costs.
Mm-hmm.
What was that for?
That was what I mentioned
The
earlier.
before? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. All right. And then on page 97, sorry, I kind of did go through this a little bit in detail, so I'm sorry if these are crazy questions. On page 97 for the general services, why is there such a significant, this is another one in the personnel increase cost. So 19 was 95,000, and then here we go in 21 and we're at 355,000. What
Well,
happened there?
We used to allocate some of the personnel time to Department 95, and I just kept looking at it as same pants, different pockets. Public Works had a similar allocation that took place dating back to when the city's first accounting system was installed in 1990, and it really wasn't providing any management information. So you'll see that's a good chunk of that. And then we also if you will, adjusted the positions. That department also took on parks, and then we changed a position from it was actually a downgrade, if you will, emergency manager to a senior administrative Then we had different changes.
Changes,
But
okay,
the biggest change on this one is we don't allocate the costs anymore.
gotcha.
So, that 106 grand, if we continue to allocate, might be, 125 or 130 in these next couple of years. Let me double check. We also had a vacancy last year that we filled in
Okay.
July.
Okay,
I think when James started. Yeah, let me double check the head count though.
that's fine. And then I think my last question is on page 109, AB 2766. What is the big $75,000 furniture and equipment purchase proposed for 2022?
I'm sorry, what page again?
109.
Electric vehicle charging station. So this money's restricted for things that can help clean the air. So I just asked our staff to look at putting some electric vehicle charging stations at city facilities. They're actually also out scrounging around for grant monies. So this was more of a placeholder than anything, but something I thought was important that we start leaning into. So that's what this
But it
was.
hasn't been established where one would be placed in
We
town.
were looking at our 3 city facilities. So City Hall, Community Center, and the Nature Interpretive Center.
Okay, gotcha. Great. All right. Those are the only questions that I have. Does anybody on the committee have any additional questions or discussion?
Just two things. What is the threshold before the council has to approve an expenditure? What's the dollar limit?
Depends on the type of expenditure. If it's something the council, I don't think they're okay in concept with, I'll put it on the agenda if it's $1. For non-maintenance related contracts, the city manager's authority is $35,000. And for maintenance contracts, it just got increased last year to $200,000.
Okay.
It had been $100,000 for 20 years.
I mean, I'll just give you my editorial. I thought the budget was good. I
Mhm.
think people are have a sigh of relief, but I think going into this economic downturn, most people thought this is event driven and the recovery will be shorter than most economic downturns, which are structural. So I think we're kind of seeing that, and it doesn't hurt to get the federal money to help backfill reserves and all that. So I think this was good. I would say that most cities that are well run have reserve policies in the 25% category. And I look at Dana Point and I think your revenue streams are much more volatile, just the TOT and sales tax. Most people depend on property tax. And, your contract with the sheriff is pretty finite, non-negotiable. It's just the amount you take. You can't really finagle with it. So I think the 25% is a good minimum for the city, given that it's dependent on two volatile revenue streams as its primary source of revenue. So I think it's good. I think it's excellent to backfill it, because the one thing I've learned in finance is that the only thing that's certain is that we will have economic downturns. It's just a question of when's the next one and how long it'll last. So clearly it is. So I think we're coming out of a pickle here nicely, cleanly, quickly, quicker than most, and get ready for the next one, because it will undoubtedly come. So I think good job.
Thanks.
Great report by staff, and yes, the budget looks amazing. So that was just a receive and discuss item, so we can move on to the next item if there's no more discussion. Item number 5, OpenGov transparency software update, and the recommended action for the committee is to receive and discuss this option. Staff report.
So I'm apologizing to Robin right now because she literally got from the doctor's office here. So she didn't have time to pick up her stuff. Then broke her toe last night,
Oh, no.
and I'm putting her on the spot saying, go.
That's fine. I
Go.
did this before that. Okay, so we have a three-year contract with OpenGov that for our transparency site, which is linked through our website, which gives graphs and pie charts of our financials. It's integrated, so it updates nightly. And that contract was scheduled to end, the third year was April 30th. So we've been in discussion. We haven't been using the budget software yet. Still been going off of spreadsheets, but we're trying to get a new budget software that will help us going forward. And just to preserve the relationship that we have and save on potential procurement costs down the road for a new contract, they agreed to let us extend the existing contract without additional cost to us until the end of this calendar year. And then between now and then, we're planning on identifying whether we're going to stay with OpenGov or go elsewhere. This, the supporting documentation just shows the number of visitors to our transparency since we integrated 3 years ago. And you can see that it's going down significantly from the first year. With 103 users in the first year, down to 60 in the second year, and 17 users in 2020. And so,
And this cost us $32,000 a year.
So my question when I was reading through this, is this software worth the cost?
if we were using the budgeting, it
So
would be worth it.
we bought this 3 years ago. Transparency is often a popular term to use.
Right.
Simply to check that box. I think it was hoped that people would use it. Having talked to other cities, I knew that it's not widely used. Others that had had this installed and in place for a number of years. So we checked the box. My hope was that the budgeting portion of this, which was brand new back then, they were literally still beta testing it at a couple cities, would pan out. But we've spent over $100,000 on this the last 3 years. And the budgeting, I didn't get a chance to look at it the last 6 months, but it still didn't have fund balance. The last time I looked at it, which I think is a pretty basic need, I believe they told us that they've added that now. So since then, a couple months ago, we had a meeting with a competitor of theirs that actually started their system as a budgeting software and then added the transparency component. So we're going to take a look at that as well. We'll likely get some dog and pony shows and have some of the vendors come in and show us, in addition to giving these guys another shot. So we still like the transparency component as just making it available, but when another system might be a couple $1,000s a year less and provide a budgeting tool and then get rid of a lot of the spreadsheets and still get the transparency, just seemed like it's time to do that. Unfortunately, with everything else going on, we're down a couple staff in their unit. We're buying time at this point in time.
Jamie?
So right now, this year, we had 17 unique users for roughly $2,000 per user is what it costs us to have OpenGov.
I'm going to bet that some of those users were actually city staff checking to make sure that the data gets loaded accurately.
Probably, I would bet 3 of those, or maybe 4, were city staff. So, I mean, best case scenario at $2,000 per user. I mean, for half that cost in staff time, you could create a booklet for each of those 17 or probably 13 residents, and half of those are probably grad students doing research for a paper for school.
I would be in favor of finding something better and not renewing this contract going forward if you guys had to. I understand the importance of transparency and putting that stuff out there, but we do such a good job. The data, if we put a lot of your financial PowerPoint presentations and briefs to council on a website.
You
I
could
mean,
put
that's
Mike's report on there too.
Exactly right. So much of this stuff is out there. At the time, I understand why we did it. We were looking to try to, answer a bunch of concerns that people had, but just us sitting up here and going through this stuff and getting these minutes and everything else out there, I think answers. Ultimately, I would support canning that at the end of the year if you can't find something that doesn't have real functionality like budgeting software for you ladies over in finance.
I support what Jamie's saying as well. I just don't see that this software is being utilized the way it needs to be, and the cost is kind of ridiculous for the amount of people that actually use it. I mean, unless this really just does help staff a lot, I don't understand the purpose of it. And clearly nobody with the numbers that are being visited, people in the community aren't using it, and it's not worth it.
I agree with all that was said. Just curious, what's in there that's not in your quarterly report?
You can slice and dice differently because it's, you can use filters, sort, that you won't get from a PDF file that's uploaded and that you look at. So
I just don't think that the average resident is going to really care about that.
it's got neat pie charts
That's cool,
and trend charts.
but it's just expensive for what you get. Because you guys do a great job with all of your reports and your pie charts and whatnot, and you're not using that. So,
Yeah, I would tell you that as a practitioner, the most valuable things I find when I'm looking at a city are these like quarterly reports, city council reports, the power decks. Gives you a quick sense of what's going on, what are their issues. Everything's there. It's so easy. You could probably just do it yourself. You are doing it yourself. So.
Just to make it clear though, the cost isn't necessarily just the transparency. Like the bulk of that cost is really allocated to the budgeting module. It's just not being utilized right now. So like the cost of the transparency alone, I think is maybe 7,000 or something, but
so
it comes as a package.
does the company offer just the transparency
I don't-
module?
I don't think they do,
aside
no.
from, okay.
What accounting system do you guys use now? Or what ERP?
Tyler Technologies, it's probably the most widely used one by governments.
But that's pure accounting. That's not forecasting.
Well, it's got some budget. It's just not real. It's not there yet. Someday it'd be really nice to have the accounting system be part of, or the budget system be part of the accounting system, but no, they've got components, but again, built by specific government agencies that paid for the software work. But we'll be taking a look at that as well. We bought this one, and my hope was that their beta testing, their budget system would work out, and it hadn't as of yet. Some more folks are using it, so we'll take another look at it. I left the 32,000 in the budget, even though Robin negotiated a contract at zero for the next 9 months or 8 months. So we'll still have that in the budget, ready to go if we decide to pull the trigger.
Any other discussion? This item is just to receive and discuss, so we'll move on to the next item. Are there any additional staff reports this evening? No? Are there any financial review committee member reports this evening? Well, then, if we have nothing else, the next regular meeting for the Financial Review Committee will be on July 27th, 2021 at 4 p.m. in City Council chambers. The meeting is adjourned.